Okay, so just to make sure we meet all the expectations out there, so in today's class we're gonna get going and speak about the deployments of the deployment option of Firepower services. Then we're gonna go to the actually to installation steps, the installation part, and speak about the options in there, and speak about also some troubleshooting steps. Then we're gonna go to speak about the redirecting traffic to the Firepower for traffic inspection. Then we're gonna go to installing the manager, the Firesite as it used to be known, or the Firepower Management Center, one and the same thing. And then we're gonna connect those two together and do a basic policy, and pretty much that's gonna be it. In the advanced class, we're gonna do all of the, let's say, the configuration things like network discovery, user discovery, application discovery, host discovery, URL filtering, malware, IPS, file trajectory, incident, IOC. So all of those steps you're going to be doing in the advanced class. Okay. So we're going to of course speak about the just one second. There we go. This is the proper. There you go. So you're going to start a discussion of speaking about the options. How would you deploy the Firepower service in the network? I'm gonna take you. We're gonna also take a quick look on the Cisco's documentation, see how they recommend to install it. I'm gonna tell you how I recommend to install it and why exactly. And also, because somebody asked yesterday, I'm gonna put on Dropbox the text file with the proper links. I'm gonna get in more details a bit later on that topic. So before we actually get going to install Firepower, we have to understand what kind of network connectivity it requires and what are the options to deploy the proper way. So Firepower network access, the module, the hardware module or the software module, requires internal network access for two reasons: in order for management traffic, and of course for inspecting user traffic. And here I'm not speaking about the let's say in the use case of running the new hardware platforms, the 4100 and the 9300, or about the running the unified code. So it's just running Firepower services as a software module or as a hardware module on the ASA X series. So we need to, when we're going to deploy the Firepower service in the network, we have to understand we need internal network access for those two types of traffic. And now and also for internet access, which it's only required so that the Firepower module can have access to Cisco's cloud. So we have two different types of requirements: access to the internal network and access to the internet. Both of them are a must. Of course, access to Cisco's cloud is only relevant if you have the AMP license and if you have the AMP feature capability enabled and you want to use it. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. So, but technically speaking, you could leave Firepower without internet access if AMP it's not a feature that you got enabled. Now let's pick about the first part about the internal network access, which pretty much we have to split that into those two different subjects. So the management traffic is achieved via the physical management interface of the ASA. So what does the management traffic, what does that mean? It means when you install a system image or when you perform any kind of updates. It's the same thing like, for example, when you do back in the days when you had the ASA SM module on the Catalyst 6K or the older module that is going to make use, it used to make use of the backplane to get updated from the system context. Pretty much the Firepower module, regardless if it's the physical version module or the software version model, it needs network access to get its image to be installed and also for updates. Likewise, it's going to communicate over that interface with the Fireside, with the manager, which can be either Fireside Management Center or the Firepower Management Center. One of the same thing as you're going to see is just a different naming convention done by Cisco. And of course also for NTP and DNS. Because NTP is clearly very important, because basically as we're gonna send log messages to the manager, to the Fireside Management Center, those need to be properly stamped with the proper time in the proper time zone. Likewise, DNS is required by the Firepower in order to do, for example, to resolve URLs to IPs, which is also used for AMP. So in order for the Firepower system, for example, to do a proper AMP, it needs, of course, DNS system to Cisco's cloud. If you want to do URL filtering, clearly it has to properly resolve names to IPs. All the traffic is being done via the management interface. And also we have the user traffic, which has to be inspected. So we have that kind of traffic, which for that traffic doesn't matter if you use the physical module, the hardware module, or the software module. All traffic will be inspected by the Firepower to the backplane of the SA, which are going to make use of Cisco's modular policy framework, let's say, to redirect interesting traffic to Firepower. Of course, as you're going to see, we can redirect all traffic or partially some traffic. Depends, of course, what traffic passing through the SA do we want to be inspected by Firepower. And as I said, I also need internet access. And likewise, this is going to be achieved via the physical management interface of the SA, and this is required in order to upload files to Cisco's cloud for sandboxing. Pretty much that's one requirement, otherwise you don't need to grant the internet access to the Firepower module. And of course, as you're going to see in a couple, we're going to look at a Cisco document and explain in more detail. This is clearly supported, so the Firepower module can be installed, configured, regardless of how the ASA runs. If it runs in routed mode, if it runs in transparent mode, if it runs in single context, or if it runs in multiple context mode. All of those options are supported. Configuration is going to be the same on the Firepower. Now for network access and internet access. So in order for the Firepower to be updated, to do DNS queries, or to have internet access, depending on the platform we're going to be using, it's going to make use of different physical management interfaces of the ASA. So if we speak about the newer ASA X module models, which is the 5506, 5508, and 5516, this is going to be done via the management 1/1 interface, which is basically going to be shared. That interface is going to be shared by both the ASA and the Firepower for management purposes. If we speak about the, let's say, the older X series, the 5512, 15, 25, 45, 55 X series, the Firepower module is going to make use of the management 00 interface. And if we speak about the 5585X, because you're going to install Firepower as a hardware module on the topmost module, not on the bottom one, it means that it is going to make use of either the management 1/0 or management 1/1 interface. So let's look at a Cisco document to see what I recommend, how this works, and speak in more detail what I recommend and why. Okay, there's a question from Neil. Does this have to be the management port, or it can be any interface on the SA that has been configured for management only? So Neil, as I'm gonna get in more details in a couple. Basically, the management interface of the ASA, you're gonna leave it unconfigured. The physical port, management 00 or management 1/1, you're gonna leave it unconfigured, no IPs. It depends on, of course, how the ASA is being deployed. You no longer put the management only keyword in there, and that's the interface which is gonna be used for the ASA for Firepower. Okay, let me, somebody doesn't hear me, so I'm gonna tell him to reconnect. Okay, let me bring up the Cisco's document. So also I'm gonna upload this document on the file slash the class. Basically, I have added in here relevant data sheets for, of course, Firepower services and Firepower Threat Defense, the unified code, and Firesite Management Center. I have also added the some relevant documents for licensing, both, of course, on the ESA and on Firesite. I've added some release compatibility metrics depending on which version you run on the SA or which version you run on the Firepower services. Basically, what is the required Firesite version you have to run. Also, some things which we spoke about yesterday: the AMP capabilities, how Cisco does sandboxing. They are pretty. These two documents are very good in here. The sandboxing capabilities, and of course the 5 steps to advanced malware protection. Installation guides for the Firepower and Firesite in there, and also the management ports. I'm going to get there as well for network access and some relevant tag documents. So for the moment, let's go on one of those documents in there. I think it is going to be okay. Let me go pop up the document. Let's see if it's this one. And this is the document. So before going to the details of this example in here, let's look at our diagram. So to make sure everybody understood exactly what I stated before. So in our use case, we run clearly on the 5515X, we run the software version, software module. So what's going to happen, the Firepower module, which is in here, has an IP address of .70. And basically, if we want to do updates, let's say if you want to update the Firepower system version from version A to version B, and let's assume that, for example, the FTP server is on PCA. So I have in here on PCA my FTP server, and I want to upgrade my system from here, for example. Or I want to install do a new installment from FTP server A. How traffic is going to work is that Firepower is configured here with an IP address of 70, and it has the default gateway to be ASA GIG02 interface. That one. So what's going to happen? Firepower is how traffic is going to work traffic is going to exit physically the management 00 interface of the ASA. So Firepower Services Module is going to make use of M00 interface of the ASA. So traffic is going to exit that interface physically. It is going to enter the switch network. So I'm going to have in here in between some layer 2 networks with switches. Then it is going to be switched and sent at layer 2 to the default gateway of the Firepower, which is the ASA. And then, of course, it's going to reach the destination, my FTP server. So traffic, management traffic from the Firepower, it is going to leave the management 00 interface in this case, because the ASA 5000 series has a management 00, management 11. So it's going to leave that interface, it's going to exit the interface, enter the switch network, and then go to its default gateway, which in my case is the ASA. So management traffic is going to pass back and forth to the ASA, is not being sent to the backplane. So there's no way you can configure the Firepower module that its management traffic is going to be sent back and forth to the backplane of the ASA. Traffic has to exit the management port of the ASA, go into the switch network, get send it to the default gateway, which in my case is the SA itself, and then send to the destination. So this is going to be the same thing for management traffic if you want to update, or if that would be also my NTP server, let's say. So NTP, if PCA would be my NTP server, the same thing happens. Likewise, if let's say PCA would be my DNS server, for example, the same thing happens. And likewise, the same thing happens if I would have AMP enabled and Firepower would have to upload a file to Cisco's cloud for sandboxing. So what's going to happen? Likewise, Firepower is going to pick up the file. Traffic is going to exit the management 00 interface, being sent back to the switch network layer 2, being routed to the default gateway of the Firepower, which in my case it's again the SA. So traffic goes through the SA and exits and goes out on the internet. So this is the management traffic, both to upload traffic in the cloud for sandboxing and to do any kind of DNS, NTP, or system updating. Now, if you look on Cisco's document in here, so they say in here, deploy the ASA Firepower module in your network. And of course, they pick up, of course, the two options of running the ASA in routed mode in here to begin with, and then it's going to be, of course, in transparent mode. So now, looking at the 5585X series, as I was saying, because you're going to deploy the Firepower service as the topmost module, it means you're going to make use of one of the built-in ports, management ports, either this one, which is 10, because each module has two built-in management ports, either the management 10 port, either the management 11 port. You get to choose, you can configure that around. But now when you go to the configuration side, given that the ASA runs in router mode, let's say, so what they state is you're gonna go on the management 10 interface and put no configuration whatsoever, just enable it. So the management 10 port of the ASA has no IPs, no nameifs, it's just enabled. And of course the Firepower module is gonna have, let's say, an address. The Firepower module, the hardware one, is gonna have an address of, let's say, 10.10.10.10. And let's assume that this management port, the physical management port of the SA, it is going to be connected in here on the switch in VLAN 10. So what that means is that if the Firepower default gateway is the SA, it can be different. I'm going to let you know how I do it and why. If the default gateway of the Firepower module is the SA itself, so let's say it's going to be 10.10.10.1, which is the ASA, which is one of the ASA IP addresses on one of its data interfaces or on one of its management ports. It depends, you get to choose. So this is one of the IPs of the ASAs on the management port of the hardware module of the ASA or on a data interface of the ASA. So what I'm clear that in this case, of course, that interface of the ASA has to be likewise on the switch in the same VLAN, given the fact that ASA is going to be the default gateway of the Firepower module. So on the switch side, you just basically connect the management port of module 0 and a management port of module 1, where the Firepower is installed, to the same VLAN, and you don't configure any IP addresses on the management port, on the physical management port of the hardware module where Firepower is installed. If we go to the, for example, the next one is being the ASA 5, the smaller X series 5506 to 5555, which means that if you run 5506, you're going to make use of management 11 port. If you run so on 5506, 8, and 16, you're going to make use of the management 11 port. For all other X devices, you're going to make use of the management 00 port. So now likewise in here, what you do, you take that management port of the SA and you put no IP address whatsoever in there. You just configure the Firepower module at the system level with an IP, as they state in there, of whatever, 192.168 1.2. I think that also that could also be the default IP, because it comes with some default IPs in there. So that's the IP of your firepower system. Firepower, F power. And then you pick up clearly, because on this models the ASA has only a physical management port, which you configure no IP addresses whatsoever. It means that if you want the default gateway of the firepower to be the SA, so if you want the default gateway of the firepower to likewise be the SA, which let's say is going to be 192.168.1.1, which is this is the SA itself, it means the SA needs to have that IP address configured on one of its data interfaces, which in this case it was configured on gig 1.2. And clearly likewise that data interface and the physical management port of the ASA have to be connected on the switch side in here on the same VLAN, whatever the VLAN is, like VLAN 20 for example, or VLAN 15. So in this use case, the physical management port of the SA is going to be like a layer 2 port, because the layer 2 termination goes at the logical interface of the firepower system. Likewise for transparent mode, it is the same thing. You make use of the same physical management ports of the firepower. Given that you're going to install firepower on the topmost module, then you're going to make use of the management 1.0 or 1.1 for the firepower management. And likewise, you put that interface 1.0.1.1. If the SA is the default gateway, likewise in the same you put that interface on the switch side in here in the same VLAN as the management interface of the SA, if the SA is the default gateway. Or otherwise, what this example states is that if you want the default gateway to be not to be the SA but another device, which the default gateway in this case is the router. So in this case, the default gateway of the firepower is going to be this router in here. Then of course this router is going to be connected likewise to the inside interface, but it doesn't have to be in there. So in this case, basically all the management traffic, in this case, because the default gateway of the firepower is going to be the router, it means that all management traffic is going to go through the router and then towards its destination. Like for example, it's going to be, let's say, to the firepower management center. So in this case, doesn't flow through the ASA, because ASA is no longer the default gateway of the firepower module. But of course, it could be. So you could basically get rid of this router in here. Let's assume this is not there at all. And likewise, what this would mean is that you put the physical management 1.0 port and the physical management 0.0 port in the same VLAN on the switch side, or instead of choosing management port, you choose one data interface likewise, and you put it in the same VLAN on the switch side. So again, the physical management port of the firepower module has to be in the same VLAN as one of the other interfaces of the SA. Like this, I chosen here the inside interface. And then likewise, if I want to send traffic out on the internet to upload something, it means that traffic is going to flow this time likewise again through the ASA, because that's my default gateway, and it goes out to the internet into Cisco's cloud. So you can do a lot of variations, and likewise they then show the options. Like in here, this was the option where the default gateway of the firepower is like again the ASA, even though it runs in transparent mode. So I'm gonna have an IP address at the firepower level. Traffic likewise exits again to the physical management port of the blade where firepower module is installed, goes through a switch, and then because the default gateway is the SA, one of the inside interfaces is being routed to the SA, and then goes out on the internet. And likewise, then it goes with the same example for the 5506 option. So the same thing, it doesn't really matter how you do it. Basically, to keep things single, you have two deployment options, and I'm going to tell you which one I recommend and why. And let's go back to our diagram. say new blank page. So given that we have one ASA with firepower services, could be hardware or software version. So this is going to be, let's say, my ASA. Now I'm going to put in here a separation, and I'm going to have in here the, let's say, ASA firewall, and then firepower services, which can be either software module or hardware module, firepower services. And let's say that on the SA, physically on the SA, you have, let's say, a couple of data interfaces. So let's say this would be, I don't know, your inside interface in that direction. I'm trying to use a different. Where is the arrow I'm trying to use? There we go, should be this one. So let's say that on the left side in here, you have the inside interface. That's the inside network. Upstream in here, you have the outside interface facing the internet or whatever outside. And then you may have a couple of DMZ interfaces. So you could have like a, of course, logical or physical interfaces, DMZ1, DMZ2, whatever. A lot of variations, DMZ or VPN interfaces, or however you want to call those. So what I would do is, because you would want to control who can connect to the firepower module, who has access to the module. You wouldn't want, you know, just anybody to be able to send traffic to that module and maybe cause it out of service. So what I would do is, I would make use in here of that management port. Let's put in here a layer 2 switch. So let's put in here a layer 2 switch. This would be a layer 2 switch. Of course, not dedicated. It could be, you know, shared for other purposes. So what I would do, I would connect the layer 2 switch, the management port, the physical management port of the SA, which in my case is 0/0. And one other, you know, sub interface of the SA or physical interface, like for example, let's say gig 0/1.29 or whatever. And of course, on the switch side, I'm going to put those two ports in the same VLAN. There's going to be two, both of those ports are going to be, let's say, in VLAN 29 in here, in VLAN 29. And then I'm going to put on the firepower service module an IP address. For example, let's say of 10.10.10 session 4, that being the IP address of the firepower, and a default gateway of 10.10.10.1, let's say. Where of course the default gateway, that 10.10.10.1, would be actually nothing else but the IP address configured on ASA on that physical interface or sub interface 10.10.10.1. Because basically at this point what I have is that in that VLAN of 10.10.10, I only have the firepower with its IP address and its default gateway, which is the SA itself. So what this means is that anyone who wants to access the firepower module for whatever reason, for management, for example, from the Fireside Management Center, SSH for management, or for whatever reason, it has to pass through the SA. So if I were to put myself here on the network somewhere, I'm Christian in here, and I want to, you know, connect to the firepower module for whatever reason. Doesn't matter from where I come, from the inside interface, from the outside interface. I have to go like this. I need to go physically to the ASA firewall. In this case, let's say enter the outside interface. The firewall, you have to be allowed by the firewall, NAT, allowed by ACLs, filters, whatever. It's going to send traffic, route it out on its gig interface. You're going to pass through the switch and then enter back the ASA to the management port in order to reach the firepower service module. This is how I would do it, because you would want to have full control on who can connect to the firepower service and what traffic can the firepower service likewise send in the network. Because likewise, you don't want, you want to have control on what the system also sends in the network, because likewise traffic sent by the firepower service in the cloud, or to the firepower to the fireside management center, it has to likewise exit the physical management port, go to the switching platform, and then enter back the SA on that Gizo 1 interface and egress to whatever destination. So you have bidirectional control back and forth on what traffic can be initiated by the module, who can access the module, and on what services. So that's what I would do. I would isolate the system completely. Even though, as I stated before, you technically can put the default gateway of the firepower module to be something else, not DSA, like a router or not a layer 3 device. But from my point of view, you're overcomplicating things, and in the end, you may lose some of the security in there. It's way better to just put in that VLAN only the firepower and then the DSA itself, and use the default gateway PDSA, because you have full control back and forth. Okay, let's see if there are any questions so far. Okay, so there's a question from Raymond. Please repeat that again. No IP address for the management port of the firepower module. So to keep things simple, as I was saying, traffic is you're gonna put an IP address on the firepower module, and the firepower module for management traffic and for uploading traffic to Cisco's cloud is gonna send the traffic through the physical management port of the ASA, which depending on which module you're going to be using, which ASA module you're going to be using, that's going to be management 00 port, management 11 port, or one of the two dedicated ports, management ports on the 5585X version. Regardless of that, so when the firepower sends traffic in the network and management traffic, then that traffic is gonna leave the SA to the management port of the SA, and then it's gonna of course get routed to the default gateway of the firepower, which, as I said, I recommend that to be also the SA, because you have bidirectional control on what happens back and forth. I clearly insist in here because you may end up with a lot of asymmetric routing, with a lot of packet drops back and forth. You may end up with not securing who can access the firepower module. So that's to begin with, that's a security you have to keep in mind when deploying the system in the network. Benjamin says, who does the actual blocking of traffic if a rule is configured to block traffic? Is it the ASA or firepower? We're gonna get there. Of course, both the ASA and the firepower is gonna drop the traffic depending on what gets wrong. So we're gonna get at that point a bit later in a couple. Actually, let me answer your question now. So to make sure everybody, I hope everybody understood what happens for the management traffic. Is the simple again. Traffic leaves, so you have to look at this box in here, these two units in here, like one box with two entities. One entity being the SA firewall and the other entity being the firepower system. But they share the same hardware behind the scenes, the same interfaces. So what happens when firepower wants to send traffic to upload data to Cisco's cloud, or to do a DNS query or NTP query, or to be updated? Then it's simple. Firepower is going to send traffic out in the network, and physically that traffic is going to leave one of the management ports of the SA. So physically traffic is going to leave one of the management ports of the SA. In my case, going to leave management 00. And if traffic being destination, if destination of the traffic is not in the same VLAN of the firepower, it means it is going to be routed to its default gateway, which is, I said, I recommend that to be the SA itself. So that means traffic is going to go on the switching side and get switched to the default gateway, which is the SA. And of course, the SA has to allow that traffic inbound of course, the access is configured in here is to allow that traffic, and then NAT it or whatever what DSA is going to do with it is going to allow it through the access control list and NAT it optionally, and then route it, of course, to the destination, which could be out of the internet for Cisco's cloud, or could be an internal server like PCA, an FTP server or DNS server or NTP server. So that's for management. You have to understand that really good. And then how traffic goes, how is traffic being inspected? You likewise, again, we're gonna see in a couple. You'll have to look at that as two boxes, but as you're going to see, traffic being inspected by the firewall service module has nothing to do with the management port of the physical ASA. As you're going to see, traffic enters the ASA if it matches my policy. So traffic enters the ASA. If it matches my policy, I'm going to redirect it through the backplane to the firewall module via MPF. So traffic doesn't leave the ASA physically, but it goes to the backbone to the firewall module. Then the firewall module is going to drop, or is going to allow it to drop the traffic. If it's going to drop it, it's going to signal to the ASA. It's going to signal to the ASA that they dropped the traffic. If it's allowed, it's going to send the traffic back to the backplane to ASA, and the ASA is going to, of course, send it to the destination if, of course, the policies are going to allow that to happen. Like if destination is routable, if access control is configured, allow that traffic, if it's not or not. So basically, both ESA and the firewall can drop that traffic, but for different reasons. So the ESA can drop it because of basic access control lists, because of not being able to route the packet, while the firewall is going to drop it because of better, smarter decisions. Because of the URL filtering, because it matches an IP signature, because it's malware. So for other reasons, it's going to drop that traffic. So traffic being inspected has nothing to do with the management port of the ASA. All goes back and forth through the backplane to the ASA. Like in my case, as you see in here, let me show you the configuration. Let's prove that is going to get there. This management port, physical port of the ASA, has no configuration whatsoever, while the Gig02 port has an IP address. And basically, at the switch level, those two links are in the same VLAN, because the default gateway of the ASA, in my case, default gateway of the firewall is the ASA itself. So like, for example, going in here, on ASA3, if we say show interface IP brief, then this is Gig02 172.16.0.1. So show IP address. There you go. Interface Gig02 is the DMZ link 172.16.10.1/24. And as you're going to see, the firewall has an IP address from the same range, and traffic is going to be routed back and forth to the management interface, where the management interface, as you can see, has no IP address configuration whatsoever. No nameif, no security level, no IP address. With or without management only, doesn't matter, it is going to work anyways. Okay, another question from Benjamin. MPF sends it to the firewall, then FPF determines if it should be dropped. Does it go back to the ASA to be dropped, or the FPF does the actual drop? As I said before, if the firewall module drops the traffic for whatever reason, it doesn't send it back to the ASA to be dropped. It's just going to send it to the ASA, hey, I killed the traffic. So the ASA is going to kill the connection, and pretty much that's it. It doesn't make sense, because if the traffic is being routed back to the ASA, it means it was allowed by the firewall module at that point.